I love this community, and I think we can all understand why. It's a very great honor to be here this evening, especially because I see so many remarkable women. I'm surprised I'm up here. This is an astounding group of women. We literally could change the world right here. So we were asked what brought us to this point of what we're doing nowadays and in our objectives and so on. And mine's been a very long journey, and many of you may have heard some of my journeys before, and this one's a much more personal journey, but it was in the works for about 30 years or so. Our words, our daily deeds, and the stories we tell will be mapping our future for generations to come. Now more than ever, we must ask ourselves, what is the story that got us here? And what new revolutionary story do we want to set our sights upon? The search for my story began when I was quite young. I had been adopted. My name originally was Marcella Funston, but I would not know this for 30 years. So when I was adopted, I was only a few months old, and at the age of 11, I began my search for my birth mother. My adopted mother's great aunt had come from England, and she brought with her my adoptive mother's family that spanned over 1,000 years. I was ecstatic about this. I love history, and I could clearly see the names and lives of those who had lived before us, and I could see how they got us to where we were. And then it hit me like a brick. This really wasn't my story. This wasn't my bloodline. So I asked my adoptive mother, well, when do I get to find out about my family history? And she abruptly told me that it was illegal for me to ever know this, and I would not know this. I was dismayed at 11 years old. I was dismayed. I thought, how could knowing one's family's history be illegal? I didn't understand that. I felt like I was destined to be a permanent boat without a rudder. So, as serendipity would have its way, the very next day in the Sacramento Union newspaper, there was an article about adoptees searching for their birth parents, with 5 addresses to research organizations. So I wrote off to all 5 of them very quietly, not telling anybody, and within a week's time, at my best friend Karen's address, I got all the letters' responses and returned. And of course, they all said the same thing. Legally, there's nothing we can do for you until you're 18 years old. And from the information you've given us, don't worry, there's plenty of time. You're young, your mother's young. Don't worry, you'll find each other. Well, the organizations didn't know it, and I didn't know it, but my mother was sick with breast cancer that time and would die a year later at the age of 35. But it would take me 19 more years of searching to discover this. And when I did find her, I found out how young she was. I fell to pieces because my adoptive mother as well, after I graduated from high school, became very sick with cancer, and I became her primary and only caregiver. So I now find that my natural mother has died, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she probably died the same way as my adoptive mother, and I find this very, very painful. So as my story unfolds, I soon discover I have a natural brother by the name of Damien. And he did not know about me until about 2 years before I found him, and I look identical to his mother, except for I have blonde hair and she had brown hair, and we even laugh the same. So when I talked to Damien, he told me there were several dear friends of Jane's who, when they discovered she was sick with cancer, she's living on the East Coast trying to get healed. These 3 women by the name of Big Paula, Bobo, and Little Paula picked up their families, their lives, and they moved to the East Coast, and they cared for my mother until she died. Once she died, they returned back to Mount Shasta, where they had first met my mother, Jane Funston. So I was told I should call these women, and I did. And as soon as I did, the reaction was all the same. Jane had a baby girl? They had no idea I existed. Jane never told them, even at her deathbed, she never told them about me. So I spent my many days with Jane's friend, feeling as though I had known them forever, getting to know Jane and her story and the story before her. Like a tidal wave, bits of pieces of Jane's life began to just flood into my world. Her poetry, her writings, her paintings, her jewelry, her scarves, even the door to her artist studio of a self-portrait of Jane with Mount Shasta in the background. These dear old friends had been holding on to all these bits and pieces of Jane, saving them for a daughter they didn't even know she had had. And when I showed up on their doorstep, they gave me all they had of my mother. So on this one particular beautiful summer day, despite being surrounded by all of Jane's friends during a reunion, hearing the stories of Jane's very passionate life, my arms filled with her artwork and her love that continued to live 20 years after her death, I felt terribly depressed. I felt sorry for myself. And of course, wouldn't you know it, there was a woman there who was a friend of a friend, and she too had just found her natural mother like me. And she too had just discovered that her mother died long, long ago. And so there, among all my mother's friends and her things, I asked this woman, I said, well, what do you have of your mother? I'm thinking writings, stories, friends. I'm thinking, well, what things do you have of your mother? And she looked at me with a very blank face and she said, well, I have her death certificate. And that's all she ever got. I got a sense of relief knowing I should be very grateful for all this. I have something of my mother that's very unusual and rare that's lived on. But I realized that I wanted more. I wanted to be able to thank her for my beautiful life. I wanted to speak to her and I wanted to hear her words to me. So I thought. Jane, if you could have known her, she was a counterculture hippie from San Francisco. She used to hitchhike from Mount Shasta, back and forth from Shasta to San Francisco, back and forth with my brother on her hip, a little towhead boy. And then when she got to the base of Mount Shasta in the summertime, she would build a teepee made out of plastic so she could see the stars and the moon at night. And she would do this at Cougar Meadow at the base of Mount Shasta, where she would stay all summer long, living off, actually, the plants there and making her paintings, painting after painting, truly, truly following her passion. So I'm quite saddened that I would not have the words of my mother, and then I hear from my brother's father that there is something there for me from Jane. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, she wrote you a poem. And I said, she wrote me a poem? You mean for me? And she's like, yes. So in the back corner in Virginia Beach of this little closet, dark little closet, the few belongings that I had left of Jane, I started pulling things out, rummaging through what was left of hers, and I came across this little poem that some of you may have heard. And ironically enough, it was called The Accidental Life, though I find nothing accidental any longer. And when I read it, I realized it's almost more, it begins as an incantation and then into a poem, but it's not just for me. It's for all women. It's for all people. And it goes like this. Mine, yours, that I am not hoar and you not dark, that my firstborn will never know me, that I am what I am and what I am now, not a spot inside the blood of my mother, nor food for scavengers that wait. Do not be angry with me. The moment on which your anger falls has waited for all of eternity to flash and disappear. Who summoned you? Well, not a drunken beggar sleeping in his doorway. Tomorrow, 100 years from now, that I lie on my back and I'm blinded by being. That something in us burns until we are no more. Sing inside me and forget. Let your love draw love from my hands, and pen, and brush, and life's smile, and cover us. So, I ask everyone here, because I've asked myself, when all these things started to come flooding at me, all these belongings of Jane's, all this story, all these love, all these friends, I started to understand the importance of legacy and what we leave behind. And I never understood that so clearly until I met Jane. So I ask you, for the sake of your children, your grandchildren, and their children, live passionately, live fully, live your life as though you're living a best-selling novel. And know by doing this, you're giving permission to future generations to do the same. This is the power of your story. This is the power of our collective story. And I cannot express enough the peace I found in my heart knowing that Jane had done just that. Thank you.